From the moment I met Caitlyn, I knew she was different. Her laugh was the kind that filled a room, her smile effortlessly disarming. We were inseparable, sharing everything from secret glances to our wildest dreams. Those first few years were a blur of passion and adventure. A love so intense it felt almost untouchable. We moved to a cozy house in the suburbs, where every room seemed to carry the echoes of our joy. Weekends were spent on road trips, her hand resting on mine as we drove along winding coastal highways. Friends envied us. They saw us as the perfect couple. But perfection has a way of hiding cracks, doesn't it? Caitlyn started bringing up strange ideas during our late-night talks. At first, it was subtle. Conversations about trust, freedom, and how monogamy felt restrictive in modern relationships. I laughed it off, thinking it was one of her intellectual musings. One evening, as we sipped wine on the porch, she turned to me, her face serious. "Jake," she said, her voice calm but resolute, "I think we should try opening our marriage." I was stunned, my mind racing. Did I hear her correctly? The woman who once called me her everything now wanted to bring others into our sacred bond? My stomach twisted, but I nodded, unsure of how to respond. Caitlyn's eyes lit up, as if she had just unburdened herself. She assured me it was about growth, not a lack of love. "It'll bring us closer," she promised. But her words felt hollow, like the echo of a bell in an empty cathedral. That night, lying in bed beside her, I stared at the ceiling, my mind a storm of confusion and dread. I told myself it was just a phase, that she'd change her mind. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test every limit of my sanity. The days that followed Caitlyn's proposal were a blur of forced smiles and suppressed doubts. I told myself that this was just a test of our love, that we'd come out stronger on the other side. But deep down, I could feel the foundation of our relationship starting to crack. Caitlyn wasted no time. She created profiles on dating apps, each swipe and notification pulling her further away from me. I pretended not to care, burying my unease beneath layers of nonchalance. This is what she wants, I told myself. If I love her, I have to let her explore. The first night she went out with someone else, I sat alone in our dimly lit living room, nursing a glass of whiskey. I tried to focus on the TV, but every sound from my phone made my heart race. When she finally came home, hours later, her face glowed with an unsettling mix of guilt and excitement. "How was it?" I asked, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside me. "It was different," she said, avoiding my gaze. Then she kissed me on the cheek and went to bed, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I should have confronted her, demanded answers. But instead, I let the silence grow, a chasm between us. Each night she went out, my resentment deepened, but so did my curiosity. Was this really bringing us closer, or was it tearing us apart? And then, one night, as I sat scrolling through social media, a thought struck me like lightning. If Caitlyn could explore, why couldn't I? I felt a strange mix of defiance and liberation. She wanted open boundaries? Fine. Let's see how she handled her own rules. The next day, I downloaded a dating app and swiped aimlessly, my heart pounding with a mix of guilt and excitement. But none of the profiles held my attention until I saw her. Amanda, Caitlyn's younger sister. Her profile was simple. A few photos, a quote about living life to the fullest. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. This was dangerous, reckless, but something about it thrilled me. Without overthinking, I sent her a message. It started innocently, jokes about family gatherings, shared memories from the past. But soon, our conversations grew deeper, more personal. Amanda understood me in ways Caitlyn no longer seemed to. For the first time in weeks, I felt alive. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but a darker part of me relished the irony. Caitlyn wanted freedom. Well, so did I. Little did I know, this was the moment everything would spiral out of control. The more Amanda and I talked, the more I felt a strange sense of validation. Unlike Caitlyn, Amanda didn't dance around her words or hide behind philosophical justifications. She was raw, unfiltered, and brutally honest. Every message we exchanged was like a spark, igniting something primal inside me. It started with late-night texts, innocent at first memories of childhood, jokes about family reunions. But soon, the tone shifted. Amanda asked questions Caitlyn never did. Are you happy? Do you feel like yourself in this arrangement? She wasn't just curious. She saw right through me. One night, I couldn't hold back anymore. Caitlyn wanted to open the door. I typed, but she didn't expect me to walk through it. Amanda's response was immediate. And now you're wondering what's on the other side. That sentence haunted me. It wasn't just flirtation. It was a dare. Meanwhile, Caitlyn seemed oblivious, caught up in her own whirlwind of exploration. She'd return from her nights out, sometimes glowing, sometimes distant. I didn't ask questions. She didn't offer details. We lived like strangers, orbiting different worlds under the same roof. One evening, Caitlyn sat me down to discuss rules for our open marriage. Transparency is key, she said, her voice annoyingly clinical. We need to be honest about who we're seeing. I nodded, playing the role of the understanding husband. But when she asked if I'd met anyone, I hesitated. For a moment, I considered telling her the truth. Instead, I lied. Not yet. Caitlyn seemed relieved, even smug. She probably thought I was too timid to embrace her game. Little did she know, I was already steps ahead of her. The next day, Amanda and I met for coffee. Seeing her in person after weeks of secret messages was surreal. She looked different from the girl I remembered. More confident, more daring. Do you think she suspects? Amanda asked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Not a chance, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure. We kept things casual that first meeting, but the tension was palpable. Every glance, every accidental touch felt charged, like we were playing with fire, and I loved it. Over the following weeks, Amanda and I grew bolder. We met more often, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for long drives where we could talk freely. She wasn't just Caitlyn's sister anymore. She was my escape, my rebellion. The thrill of secrecy was intoxicating, but it came at a price. Each time I saw Caitlyn, guilt gnawed at me. Yet, a darker part of me found satisfaction in the irony. She had set the rules. I was simply playing the game. But deep down, I knew this couldn't last. Secrets have a way of surfacing, and the closer Amanda and I became, the more I felt the weight of the inevitable. The storm was coming, and when it hit, none of us would come out unscathed. The first time Caitlyn went on a date, I told myself I didn't care. I forced a smile, kissed her goodbye, and watched as she walked out the door. But as soon as it closed, the emptiness of the house hit me like a punch to the gut. I tried to keep busy, cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, even went for a run. But nothing could quiet the deafening silence. My mind raced with questions. Who is he? What does he have that I don't? The thought of another man touching her, hearing her laugh, seeing her smile in ways I hadn't in months. It was unbearable. When she returned home late that night, I was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch TV. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair slightly disheveled. I wanted to ask her everything but settled for a simple, "How was it?" "Fine," she replied, her tone casual, as if she'd just returned from running errands. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't press her. Instead, she kissed me lightly on the forehead and went to bed. I sat there for hours, staring at the blank TV screen. My mind reeled with anger, jealousy, and something I couldn't quite name. Was this really what she wanted? Was this supposed to strengthen our bond? In the following weeks, Caitlyn fully embraced her newfound freedom. She went on more dates, each one chipping away at the image of the woman I once thought I knew. At home, she was distant, like a stranger passing through. Her laughter, once warm and genuine, now felt forced, hollow. But I stayed silent, playing the role of the supportive husband. Each night she went out, I poured myself a drink and stared at my phone, waiting for her to come back. Every hour felt like a lifetime, every creak of the floorboards a reminder of the growing distance between us. Then came the night everything changed. Caitlyn had left for another date, and I was drowning in my own bitterness. That's when Amanda texted me, "You free tonight?" I hesitated for a moment, then typed back, "Yeah, what's up? Just bored. Wanna hang out?" It was a simple invitation, but I knew what it meant. I grabbed my keys and left without a second thought. We met at a quiet bar on the edge of town. Amanda was already there, sipping a cocktail, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. She looked effortlessly stunning, her confidence magnetic. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. With her, everything felt easy, natural. Unlike Caitlyn, who had become a mystery to me, Amanda was an open book. She didn't shy away from the tension between us. She leaned into it. By the time we left the bar, the line between what was right and wrong had blurred beyond recognition. Outside, under the dim glow of the streetlights, Amanda leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to keep pretending, Jake." And with that, she kissed me. It was electric, a rush of adrenaline and forbidden desire. For a moment, the world around us disappeared. But when we pulled apart, the weight of what we'd just done crashed down on me. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding. Caitlyn was already asleep when I walked in, her face peaceful, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath our roof. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the taste of Amanda still lingering on my lips. I had crossed a line, one I could never uncross. The game had changed, and I was no longer just a player. I was a threat to everything Caitlyn and I had built. But the strangest part? I didn't feel regret. I felt alive. The day after Amanda and I kissed, I couldn't shake the memory of it. The heat, the rush, the sheer audacity. I had crossed a line, and yet, instead of guilt, I felt a dark satisfaction. Caitlyn wanted freedom? Fine. I was playing by her rules now. At breakfast, Caitlyn seemed unusually cheerful. She hummed as she made coffee, her eyes sparkling like they used to. "I was thinking," she began, "maybe we should have a date night soon. Just the two of us." Her words caught me off guard. Date night? After weeks of treating me like a roommate? I nodded, masking my confusion. Sure, sounds good. But her suggestion only fueled my resolve. She had no idea what I'd been doing, who I'd been with. The thought sent a thrill through me, though I knew it couldn't last. Secrets have a way of surfacing. Later that day, Amanda texted, "Last night was something." "Yeah," I replied, trying to keep it casual. "We good?" Her response was quick. "Better than good. When can I see you again?" I hesitated. Meeting again felt like tempting fate, but the pull was too strong to resist. "Soon," I typed, already imagining the next encounter. That weekend, while Caitlyn was out, Amanda and I met at a secluded park. We walked along the trails, the autumn leaves crunching beneath our feet. There was no need for pretense anymore. The connection between us was undeniable. As we sat on a bench overlooking the lake, Amanda broke the silence. "You know this can't stay hidden forever, right?" "I know," I said, though I wasn't sure what would happen when the truth came out. "But for now, I don't care." She smiled, her eyes gleaming with a mix of mischief and defiance. "Good. Neither do I." The kiss we shared that day was different. Slower, more deliberate. It wasn't just about rebellion anymore. It was about something deeper, something neither of us could name. When I got home, Caitlyn was waiting for me. She seemed restless, her usual composure cracked. "We need to talk," she said, her voice firm. My heart raced. Had she found out? Had Amanda said something? "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to sound calm. Caitlyn sighed, running a hand through her hair. "This isn't working the way I thought it would." "What isn't?" "This experiment," she said, gesturing vaguely. "The open marriage. I thought it would make us stronger, but it's only made things weird." I bit back a bitter laugh. "Weird? That was an understatement." She continued, "I've been thinking, maybe we should slow down, focus on us again." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Now, after all this, she wanted to close the door she'd flung open? I forced a neutral expression, my mind spinning. "That's a big shift," I said carefully. "Are you sure?" Caitlyn nodded, her eyes pleading. "I miss us, Jake." I wanted to tell her everything right then, to throw her hypocrisy back in her face. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded, pretending to consider her words. Let's talk about it more, I said, buying time. That night, as Caitlyn slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind a storm of conflicting emotions. She thought she could undo the damage, but it was too late. We had already ventured too far into the dark, and there was no turning back. Amanda's words echoed in my head. This can't stay hidden forever. She was right. The truth was a ticking time bomb, and I had no idea how much longer we could keep it from exploding. After Caitlyn's confession, I couldn't stop thinking about her sudden change of heart. She wanted to fix things, to go back to the way we were. But how could we? The foundation of our marriage had already crumbled under the weight of her experiment. I agreed to her request to focus on us, but my mind was elsewhere. Every glance, every touch felt like a lie. And then there was Amanda. She was the shadow in the room, the secret I carried everywhere I went. Our next meeting was inevitable. Amanda texted me late one night, "We need to talk." We met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, far enough that no one would recognize us. Amanda looked tense, her usual confidence replaced by something more fragile. "She told me," Amanda said, her voice low. "Told you what?" "That she wants to end the open marriage," she said, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "She called me last night, said she's refocusing on you." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. "And what did you say?" "I told her it was about time," Amanda said with a bitter smile. "But we both know it's too late for that, don't we?" I nodded, unable to meet her eyes. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "What happens now, Jake? You can't just pretend this didn't happen." "I won't." I didn't have an answer. Part of me wanted to walk away, to bury the truth and try to rebuild something with Caitlyn. But another part of me, darker, more honest, knew that was impossible. The connection I had with Amanda was too strong to ignore, too deep to erase. The tension between us lingered as we parted ways. Driving home, I felt the weight of the double life I was leading. Caitlyn was waiting for me, her face lighting up as I walked through the door. "Hey," she said softly, wrapping her arms around me. "I made dinner." The warmth of her embrace felt like a noose tightening around my neck. I forced a smile and kissed her forehead, pretending, as I had been for weeks, that everything was fine. But Caitlyn wasn't stupid. Over the next few days, I noticed her watching me more closely. She asked more questions, her tone light but probing. "Where were you this afternoon? Who were you texting just now?" Each question was a small crack in the fragile mask I wore. I could feel her suspicion growing, her eyes narrowing as she searched for the truth. One evening, as we sat on the couch, Caitlyn suddenly turned to me, her face unreadable. "Jake," she said, her voice steady, "are you hiding something from me?" My heart stopped. For a moment, I considered telling her everything. But the image of Amanda's face flashed in my mind, and I hesitated. "No," I said, forcing a calm tone. "Why would you think that?" Caitlyn's eyes lingered on mine for a moment too long. "I don't know," she said finally, her voice softer. "I just feel like something's off." She didn't press further, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The game was nearing its breaking point, and I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. That night, as I lay in bed beside her, I realized the truth. This wasn't just a test of our love. It was a countdown to disaster. And when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't just destroy us. It would leave scars neither of us could ever heal. The tension in our home became suffocating. Caitlyn's questions grew more pointed, her eyes sharper, like she was dissecting every word I said, every move I made. The facade I'd so carefully constructed was beginning to crack. "Who were you texting?" she asked one evening, her voice deceptively light. I glanced at my phone and shrugged, the weight of Amanda's last message burning in my pocket. "Just a coworker," I lied. Caitlyn nodded but didn't seem convinced. The way she watched me made my skin crawl. She wasn't just suspicious. She was waiting for me to slip, to confess, to give her a reason to confirm her fears. Meanwhile, Amanda grew restless. Her texts became more frequent, her words tinged with frustration. You can't keep this up forever. She's going to figure it out. When are you going to tell her the truth? But what was the truth? That I had crossed a line I could never uncross? That her sister, the one person Caitlyn trusted implicitly, was now tangled in a web of lies with me? The breaking point came one Saturday evening. Caitlyn and I had agreed to have a reset dinner, something to rekindle the connection we had lost. I forced myself to act normal, to pretend that everything was fine. We cooked together, laughing at burnt garlic and spilled wine. For a moment, it almost felt real. But beneath the surface, my thoughts churned. I could see Amanda's face in my mind, hear her voice. "Jake," Caitlyn said, breaking the moment of silence. Her tone was soft, but there was a sharp edge to it. "Are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. "Of course," I said, avoiding her gaze. She placed her hand on mine, her eyes searching. "You don't seem like it. Lately, you've been distant." I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. The air between us grew heavy, thick with the weight of everything unsaid. Caitlyn sighed, pulling her hand away. "I thought this open marriage would help us," she said, her voice tinged with regret. "But it feels like it's only pushed us further apart." I wanted to tell her she was right, that this was all a mistake. But before I could speak, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen, her expression unreadable. "I need to take this," she said, walking out of the room. As soon as she was gone, my phone buzzed. It was Amanda. "I need to see you. Tonight." My heart raced. This was a game I could no longer control, a fire that had grown beyond my ability to contain. Caitlyn was right. The open marriage had pushed us apart. But it wasn't just her experiment that had broken us. It was me. And now, with the walls closing in, I could feel the collapse coming. The only question was who would get hurt the most when everything fell apart. I stood there for a long moment, staring at my phone. Amanda's message blinked back at me, demanding action. I could feel the heat of the moment settle over me, a crushing weight that seemed to press down on my chest. "I need to see you. Tonight." It was no longer a question. It was an ultimatum. I knew what I had to do. Caitlyn was in the other room, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke in hushed tones to someone. Maybe she was talking to another man. Maybe it was just another one of her meaningless conversations. But I knew one thing. Tonight, she wouldn't be in my way. I left without telling her. I didn't even bother making an excuse. As I walked out the door, I could hear the sound of her voice in the background, unaware that everything was about to change. The drive to Amanda's place was a blur of adrenaline and guilt. Each turn felt like a step closer to something irreversible, something I couldn't undo. I wasn't just betraying Caitlyn anymore. I was betraying everything we had once built, the trust, the connection, the promise. When I arrived at Amanda's apartment, the door swung open before I even knocked. She stood there, her face intense, her eyes dark with anticipation. "Jake," she whispered, pulling me inside before I could speak. The moment the door shut behind me, everything else ceased to matter. We were no longer playing games. There were no more rules. There was only us, in the heat of this forbidden connection. We kissed before I could process what was happening, the urgency, the craving between us consuming everything. There was no stopping it now. No more questions. No more pretending. As we collapsed onto her bed, everything I had been hiding came crashing down. It wasn't just physical. It was an emotional explosion, a culmination of weeks of tension, of lies, of raw, desperate need. Amanda wasn't just Caitlyn's sister anymore. She was the escape, the rebellion, the person who made me feel seen in a way that Caitlyn hadn't in months. But as the night went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just crossed a line so far beyond anything that could ever be fixed. When it was over, when the adrenaline had worn off, and we lay there in the silence of the aftermath, something inside me twisted. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about the destruction of everything I had once believed in. I wasn't just losing Caitlyn, I was losing myself. And that's when I heard it. The sound of a car pulling up outside. The familiar engine. Caitlyn. I froze. Amanda's eyes widened in panic as the sound of the door opening reached our ears. Without a word, we jumped off the bed. I scrambled for my clothes, my heart racing. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to fix this. But it was too late. Caitlyn was already at the door. "Jake!" she called. Her voice filled with uncertainty and suspicion. I stood there, exposed. The weight of everything that had just happened hung in the air between us. The walls had come crashing down, and there was no hiding the truth anymore. Amanda looked at me, her face pale, and then at Caitlyn. There was no turning back. The game was over. Caitlyn stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room before locking onto me. Her gaze was cold, calculating. What the hell is going on here? For the first time in a long time, I had no words. The room was suffocating with silence. Caitlyn stood in the doorway, her eyes darting between Amanda and me, the weight of the moment pressing down on all of us. My heart pounded in my chest, every nerve firing in panic. I could feel the sharpness of her gaze, cutting through me like a blade. I didn't know what to say. There were no excuses, no justifications for what had just happened. All the lies, all the secrets, they hung in the air like an insurmountable wall. Amanda was the first to speak. "Caitlyn, I didn't mean for it to happen like this." Her voice wavered, betraying the guilt she was trying to hide. But there was no hiding it. We were caught, exposed in the worst possible way. Caitlyn's gaze snapped to Amanda, fury flashing in her eyes. "You," she began, but her voice faltered as she turned to me. "Jake," she said, her voice low but steady. "How could you do this?" I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. What could I say? I had betrayed her. I had broken the one promise that mattered, the one thing that held us together. "I never thought you'd be the one to hurt me," Caitlyn continued, her voice growing shakier. "I thought you loved me. And you?" She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "You went behind my back with her. My sister." Felt like the ground beneath me was giving way. I could hear my own breath coming in sharp gasps, but no words could escape my mouth. What could I say to make this better? There was no coming back from this. Amanda stood awkwardly in the corner, her face pale, but she didn't leave. She couldn't leave. She had just as much to lose as I did. I turned to Caitlyn, trying to find the right words. "I didn't mean for this to happen, Caitlyn. It just did. But I don't know if I can undo it. I don't know if we can fix this." Caitlyn's eyes hardened. "You think that makes it better? You think that's going to make everything okay?" I took a step forward, but Caitlyn held up her hand, stopping me in my tracks. Don't even try to apologize. You've already done enough." I could feel her slipping away, like sand through my fingers. All the walls I had tried to build, all the distance I had placed between us, they were all collapsing now, right in front of me. Amanda finally spoke again, her voice shaking. "Caitlyn, I'm sorry. I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." Caitlyn turned her gaze to her sister, her expression one of betrayal and disgust. "Don't you dare apologize to me," she spat. "You've made your choice, and I've made mine." I could feel it, this was the end. Whatever fragile bond we had left was shattered. There was no coming back from this. "I'm leaving," Caitlyn said, her voice final. "I can't do this. I can't live with you knowing what you've done, knowing what you've taken from me." She turned on her heel and walked toward the door. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to stop her. I wanted to reach out to beg her to stay, but I knew it was too late. She was already gone. Amanda looked at me, her eyes filled with guilt and fear. "Jake, what do we do now?" But I didn't have an answer. There was no answer. We had both crossed a line, and now we were left with the wreckage. There was no rebuilding what had been broken. I stood there for a long time, alone in the silence, as the weight of my choices finally sank in. I had lost Caitlyn. I had lost everything, and there was no one left to blame but myself. The silence in the house was deafening after Caitlyn left. The kind of silence that gnaws at you, eats away at the corners of your mind, and makes every breath feel like a weight. The reality of what had just happened, The betrayal, the destruction of everything I thought I knew about love, about us, crashed down on me all at once. Amanda was still standing there, frozen, her face pale. I could see the regret in her eyes, but it wasn't just about what had happened. It was about the realization that she, too, had lost. Caitlyn was gone from her life, too. And for what? A moment of forbidden passion? A secret that had never had a chance of surviving? We screwed up, Amanda whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't respond. What could I say? The damage had been done, and nothing could erase it. Not the apology I would never get a chance to make. Not the promises I'd broken. Not the trust one had shattered. I never wanted this to happen, Amanda continued, her voice growing more desperate. I didn't want to lose you, but I didn't think Caitlyn would. I didn't think she would. She trailed off, her words failing her as her face crumpled into a mixture of shame and fear. I felt my own guilt consuming me, wrapping around me like a suffocating rope. It wasn't just you, I said quietly. I knew what I was doing. I knew I was making a choice I could never undo. Amanda looked at me, her eyes filled with a complicated mixture of emotions. What now? She asked softly, as though we were both waiting for some kind of miracle, something that would fix everything. But deep down I knew there was no fix. There was only damage, irreversible and raw. I walked over to the window, staring out at the empty streets below, my mind whirling with questions that had no answers. How had it come to this? How had everything that was once good between Caitlyn and me devolved into this? Into nothing? The longer I stood there, the more the weight of it all settled in. Caitlyn was gone, and she wasn't coming back. She had made her choice and I had made mine. The truth was, though, that I wasn't sure which was worse, losing Caitlyn or losing the person I thought I could be. Amanda's voice broke through my thoughts. Jake, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you like this. I thought we had something real, but now... She trailed off, her hands trembling as she pulled them to her chest. I turned to face her, but I didn't have any words left to offer. The truth was, I had been in love with the idea of love, of what it could give me, freedom, excitement, the feeling of being wanted. But now that I had it, now that it had all been taken to its extremes, I saw how hollow it was. Amanda stepped forward slowly, reaching out as if to comfort me, but I took a step back. I'm sorry, I said again, this time to her, but I need to be alone. Her face faltered, a flash of hurt crossing her features, but she nodded, taking a step back as well. I understand. And just like that, she was gone. I sat down on the couch, my hands gripping the armrest as I tried to process everything. But there was nothing left to process. Caitlyn had left. Amanda had left. I had destroyed everything, and now I was left with nothing but the wreckage of what was. Days passed in a haze, an unbearable quiet that filled every room, every corner of the house. The place that had once been home to laughter, shared moments, and whispered promises now felt like a prison. Caitlyn was gone. Amanda was gone. And I was alone with the consequences of my choices. I tried to distract myself. I worked, drank, did anything to avoid facing the truth. But it always crept back in, gnawing at me from the corners of my mind. I couldn't stop seeing Caitlyn's face. The hurt, the disappointment, the disbelief. The way she had looked at me, as though I was a stranger. As though I had never been the man she thought she knew. Every morning, I expected her to walk through the door, to tell me that she had made a mistake, that we could fix it. But she never came. Couldn't blame her. I had broken her, shattered the trust we had spent years building. The damage was irreparable, and somewhere deep down I knew that. Then, one afternoon, I got a text. It was Caitlyn. We need to talk. My heart pounded as I stared at the message. I hadn't heard from her since that night, and the prospect of seeing her again felt like both a relief and a punishment. I didn't know what she wanted, but part of me clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for us. I arranged to meet her at a park, a neutral ground where we could talk without the weight of the house, the memories, the ghosts of everything that had happened. When I saw her sitting on a bench, her posture stiff and her eyes distant, I felt a surge of guilt rush through me. She was beautiful as ever, but there was a coldness to her that hadn't been there before. I sat down beside her, our shoulders almost touching, but there was an invisible wall between us. "I didn't think you'd reach out," I said quietly. She didn't look at me. Instead, she stared straight ahead, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've been thinking about everything. About us." I swallowed, my throat dry. "I'm so sorry, Caitlyn. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen." She finally looked at me, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "You didn't just hurt me, Jake. You betrayed me. You broke my trust in ways I don't think you even understand." Her words were like daggers, each one striking deeper than the last. I wanted to apologize again, to beg for her forgiveness, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. She had already made up her mind. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know if I ever will. What you did, it's not something I can just forget." I nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't expect it. But I want you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to lose you." Caitlyn closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "But you did. And now, I don't know who you are anymore. I don't know if I even recognize you." The truth was, I didn't recognize myself either. Somewhere along the way, I had become someone I didn't even want to be. I had betrayed the one person who had trusted me with her heart, and now I was left with nothing. "I'm so sorry," I whispered again, the words feeling hollow even as I said them. Caitlyn wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. "I need to move on, Jake. I need to heal. And I can't do that if I'm still tied to you." I felt the finality in her words, the weight of them settling over me like a blanket of cold reality. She was done. She was walking away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. She stood up, turning away from me. For a moment I wanted to call out, to beg her to stay, to tell her I would change, that I could fix this. But I didn't. I just stood there, watching as she walked away, each step taking her further from me. When she was gone, I sat there for a long time, the silence more oppressive than ever. I had lost everything. My marriage, my integrity, my sense of self. And in that moment, I realized that sometimes, no matter how much you want to undo your mistakes, some things can never be fixed. This was the end. Not just of my relationship with Caitlyn, but of the man I used to be. And there was no way to go back. As I sit here, reflecting on everything that happened, I can't help but think, how often do we make decisions that change our lives forever? How many of us get caught in the web of our own choices, only to realize too late the consequences of those actions? If you're watching this, I want you to think about your own relationships. What are you willing to sacrifice for the sake of excitement or freedom? And what happens when you cross a line that can never be undone? If you've ever been in a situation where everything you knew and loved fell apart, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below, share your story, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about the consequences of our choices. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we learn too late.